Guys, so in this course we're going to go over HTML, CSS and JavaScript. I'm not going to make the videos too long because I don't want to overload you. But yeah, we're going to start off with the HTML and then move on to CSS and then lastly do JavaScript. So let's right click here and create a new folder. You can do this anywhere on your computer. And I'm just going to call this HTML, CSS and JavaScript. And in here I'm just going to put all of the files that we work with throughout this course. So if you haven't already watched the video on how to set up VS Code, you should do that first. And then we just want to right click in here, we want to click open in terminal. And then we want to open this up in VS Code. So we just say code and then a dot. So in this first video, I'm just going to show you how to create your first HTML file and the basic structure of that HTML. So up here on the top left, we just want to create a new file here. And I'm going to name it index.html. And it's important that we end that in .html. That's how the browser knows that this is a HTML file. So in here we want to type HTML, and here we can see there's an option for HTML5. I just want to click that and show you what it looks like when it's complete. But obviously right now we don't want to autocomplete this because we won't learn anything if we do that. So let's remove this. And so in HTML there's something called tags, and the tag is basically less than sign and then a greater than sign with some text inside of it. And basically any tag that we create has to also have a closing tag. So this is the same thing but just with the slash as well. So basically if we open a tag here, we have to close it on this side. So the basic structure of an HTML document is we need to create an HTML tag here, and this needs to surround everything. By surround, I mean the opening tag needs to be at the top and the closing tag needs to be at the bottom. So in between of this, we can create a head tag. And this head tag is basically, you can think of it as the settings for your website. So the settings for this specific page. And after this, remember it's not inside of the head tag, it's inside of the HTML tags, but after the head tags, we want to create the body. So the way you can think of this is, oh sorry, I misspelled body here, it's meant to be a lowercase y. So the way we can think of this is that the HTML is the entire page. And then the head is where the settings of this page is stored. So for example, if we wanted a title here, we can do that. Let's just call it my website. So this is where the settings would go. And the body down here is where the actual content of the page is. So let's just create something down here. I know I haven't explained to you what this title means, and I'm also not explaining what I'm typing down here, but we'll see this when we run the file. So now I'm going to create an h1 tag. Again, I'll explain what all of this is when we run the file, and I'll just write the word Theo here. That's my name. So if we just open up this file from the folders here, you might be able to double click on it and it will open, or you might have to select it and right click and click on open with, and then select your browser from here. Also what you can probably do is open up your browser and just drag that file into here. And now you'll see that the h1 tag that we made inside of VS Code, this tag right here, this is what's displaying here. So the h1 tag is actually, it stands for heading, and there's different versions of this tag. So if we were to name this h2 for example, that would be a smaller version. So let's just refresh this and you can see that it got smaller here. and it goes all the way up to H6, which is the smallest. And then up here in the settings, you can see we used a title setting here, and we typed in my website. So we can actually find that up here at the top. So up here it says my website, and that's what that title setting did. So yeah, now I hope you guys understand that basically we have a HTML tag that wraps everything. We have a head and a body tag, which the head contains all of the settings and the body contains all of the content that we show on our page. Okay guys, so in this video we're going to go over the different tags that we can use inside of HTML. But before that, I know it gets a bit annoying to save the file here every time and then go back to your browser and refresh. So actually what we're going to do is let's head into the extensions here, and we want to search for live server. And you should find this one here, so you can just install that. I've already got it installed here. And once you do that, you may need to close and reopen Visual Studio. And then at the bottom here, you should see an option to run a live server. So let's click on this. And it should have opened up another file here. So this is the one we had originally. We can close that. And this is the one it opened up. It should show you like IP and address up here. And this one is actually live. So now what we can do is we need to resize this window. We'll use this option up here to put it on the right hand side. And then we'll open up our Visual Studio Code on the left hand side. And we'll just resize this so that it doesn't take up a lot of space here. And now if we were to write something in here, some text for example, as soon as we hit save, it will automatically show up over here. So this is the benefit of using the live server extension. And remember, once you're done here, you do have to click this button down here again just to close the server, or else it will stay running in the background. But yeah, let's get rid of this now. So I told you we were going to look at different tags in this video. So obviously we've seen one of the tag, which is the H tag. And as you can see, there's 6 options here, H1 up to H6. And this is a heading tag basically. So H1 is the largest size that you can get. And then H6 would be the smallest. So let's just create that H1 tag. And inside of it, again, I'll just write the word, this is a heading. And if we save that, we can see that this is what the H1 tag looks like. So we can also type out H2 up to H6, but I guess you already get the idea of what this does. Let's instead look at the P tag next. So the P tag is actually meant for holding paragraphs inside of it. It's just normal text. Anything you write in here will just look like normal text in the browser. And oops, I accidentally clicked on something there. So yeah, the P tag is just your paragraph tag. It's what you use for like writing articles and stuff like that. And next, let's look at the A tag. So this is how you would create links. So I'll just name this my link, and you'll actually see that this is not working right now, so it won't like highlight when you move your mouse over it or something. That's because the A tag needs a special attribute called an href. So I know we haven't talked about attributes so far, but basically you just put it inside of the opening tag. You type the name of the attribute and then equals to, and then whatever value you need to pass in. So for an A tag, we need to give it an href attribute, that's href, and we need to give it the URL that this will point to. So obviously we're not actually linking to anywhere, so I'm just going to put a hash symbol here. The hash basically means we're linking to the same page, we don't want it to go anywhere. And I'm just going to save this, and now you can see that the underline shows up and we can actually click on this. This is a link now. And yeah, that's how you would create a link. So next we can also look at image, which is img. This needs a src attribute. So this is the source of the image, and the source is basically whereabout the image is. Usually we'd copy an image into the same folder and then just write the name over here, but right now I don't have an image to show you. The image tag is actually pretty cool, so it's self-closing. That means we don't have an opening tag and a closing tag. We just need to include the slash at the end here inside of the opening tag. And this is called a self-closing tag. So I'm just going to copy an image into this folder just to show you what it looks like. Let me just go to my images here and Inkscape. Okay, let me take this image here. And now I just need to type in the name of the image here. And if I save this, we should see now that it shows an image on this page. So that's how you'd use the image tag. It's pretty cool. It's self-closing. You just need to include the source attribute here. But yeah, I'm going to get rid of this because it's just a bit messy on the screen. The last thing we can look at is the div tag. And this is also interesting because a div tag is basically, it does nothing. Like, it adds nothing to the screen. Even if we put a million of these in a row here, the page would still look the same. It takes up no space, but what it is used for is to group things together. So if we wanted to, for example, create an h1 inside of here, and yes, you can create tags by just typing out the tag name and then pressing tab, and this would create the opening and closing tag for you. So it will save you some time instead of typing out the whole thing yourself. Yeah, so what the div tag is for grouping things together. So we can create an h1 and then a p tag down here, and I'm just going to type random stuff in here, and now you can see that it's grouped together nicely. So right now we don't really have a use for the div tag, but once we start working with CSS and styling our pages, then the div is going to become important because we can group stuff together and then apply all the styling to just this div instead of each element separately. So these are some basic tags that I'm showing you right now. There are also other tags. I'm going to go over the lists next, so let's get rid of all of this. So there's two types of lists we can do. One is an unordered list. So this is just a UL tag, and inside of any list, whether that's unordered or an ordered list, we want to create LI items. So the LI stands for list item, and inside of here we'll just create item 1, and let's copy this and paste it below, and we'll call that item 2. And if we save this and look at it here, this is what a list would look like. So this is an unordered list, so it will just show you this dot here, but we could have made it an ordered list by changing this to OL. And if we save this now, it will show a numbered list. So this is the difference between unordered and ordered. And you can basically just copy as many items as you want in here and it would just be numbered all the way down. Let's see, next let's go over tables. So to create a table, it's literally just the table tag. And there's a few things we can do inside of here. One is we can create rows. So let's call this a TR. TR stands for table row. And you can think of this in the same way that we did the div before. So the row is basically a container that contains all of the stuff that needs to go in that row. Remember, in a table we have columns that go all the way down, and then the row is the thing that goes across. So let's see an example of this. Let's create a TD, So this is table data. So okay, let me go over all of this again. The table is the entire table. The table row is one row going across, and then the table data is what's inside of that row. So I'm just going to write here item 1, and below this I'm going to create another TD, and I'll type in here item 2, and if we save this we can see that now there's 2 items going left to right on the screen here. And if we even copied that down below and we named this item 3, now we have 3 items. So what's happening here is inside of this row, everything we put inside of here is going to go left to right, all of the table data. And if we were to create another row here, that would be below the first row. So if I just save here, the second row would be below the first row. And this is basically how a table works. Also, on the first row in your table, instead of using table data here, we can use the th tag instead. I'm just going to update all of this quickly to say th. And if we save this, we can see that now these are slightly like bolded. So th stands for table header. So td is table data, and then th is table header. Now this may not look that good right now, but remember when we style this up with CSS and stuff, then that's where we'll get a better looking table and stuff. But for right now, we just need to know how the table works. And yeah, I think that's all of the tags that I wanted to show you in this video. Hey guys, so in this video we're going to learn about classes. So what are classes? Firstly, let's say we have 2 h1 tags here. So we have something written here, and we have another h1 with something else written here. Well, let's say we wanted to apply styling to this, so we wanted to change this color to blue, for example. If we were to say in the CSS that it must change h1 to blue, it's going to change both of these to blue. So if we wanted to only apply to one h1 tag, which is usually how we style things on a web page, we want to give class names to each thing that's in here. So for example, I can call this class of title, and then this bottom one I don't need to give it a class. And then when we are doing the CSS, we can just say style the title only with the blue text. So that would turn only this one blue, and this one would just stay normal as it is. So in this video, since we can't end it right now, all we did is just describe the word title. Let's build out a mock-up site that we can apply the CSS to in the next video. So we're going to start CSS in the next video. So let's begin by creating an h1 at the top of the page. This will just hold the title. I'll just use the word title here. We won't really put any real content into this page. One more thing we might want to do here is let's put this in a div. So div, and then we'll put the h1 inside of here. And the reason for this is we want to style the whole area around the div and stuff. So let's do that. We'll still call it title. And next, let's create an article. So an article will contain a heading and then some text inside of it, so a paragraph tag. So let's do another div for that. And inside of it, we'll just do an h3, and we'll call this article heading. And below this, we want to do a HR. So an HR is a horizontal line that goes across the screen. And let's just save this and see what it looks like. So this is the HR. It's just a horizontal line across the screen. And below this, we'll just do a p tag. And actually, if we type in here lorem, L-O-R-E-M, and we hit tab here, it will just give us a bunch of random text to put inside of there. just to make it look like there's actual text inside here. We use this for prototyping. And yeah, that will basically be our article. Let's copy this once or twice, but first let's add in the classes. So at the top here, the first div which holds the title, let's give it a class of, let's call it header. And then on this bottom div, we want to give it a class of article. And actually inside of the article, we want to give this h3 and this p tag separate classes. So we'll give the h3 tag a class of article dash heading. And then we want to give this p tag a class of article dash content. So the reason why we're doing this is we don't want to style the heading the same way as we style the content inside of it. So for example, if we change the size of the text here, we don't want this to become huge as well. We just want it to affect the title only. And now we should be able to just copy this down a few times. And now we have 3 articles here. So I'll just neaten this up a bit, and then in the next video we'll go over CSS and how we can style this up a bit better. And actually let's just add a button in here as well so that we can look at how we style that. So let me get rid of these 2. So when you're in this position where there's like a huge lot of text here and you don't want to go all the way to the end just to create a new line, what you can do in Visual Studio is you can actually create something underneath here. So for example, a button, and then you hold down Alt on your keyboard and you press the up arrow and you can move that into the div. So that's a bit quicker than scrolling about on your page and maybe making a mess. So let's just give this button a class of article dash button. And we'll just give it some text of like go to article. And now we can copy that entire div down a few times. So we have a few articles here and they have headings, content, and then a button to click on. Hey guys, so in the last video we just created the template for our HTML file and we added the classes to each of our tags. So in this video, let's create our CSS file and create styles for this. So to do this, let's click on the Explorer up here and we'll create a new file by clicking this new file button, and we'll name this app.css. So we don't need to name it app, we could name it anything as long as it ends in .css. And the first thing we want to do is link this file to our HTML file. So to do this, we want to go in the head section and we want to add a link tag. So just type the word link and press tab and it should fill out this rel property on its own. So this rel of style sheet is basically saying what relationship does this linked file have to our main HTML file. So we're saying here that we're linking a style sheet. And for the href property, we just want to give it the name of our file, which is app.css. And if we save this, our CSS file should now be loaded in. Obviously, we don't see anything here because there's nothing written in it. But let's start by styling the header. So if we copy this header class, we can go to the app.css and we just want to put a dot here and then the header class. And next we want to use curly braces, and inside of these curly braces is where we want to apply the style for the header. So I'm just going to put some default styling here just so that we can see how this works, and then we'll explain what it's doing later. So we want to use a height, and let's set this to 100 pixels, and then we want to use a width. Actually, let's not set a width because it's going to fill up the whole screen anyway. And you can see that as soon as we save this, the title, there's a huge gap here. So what this does is it changes the height of the header element. Remember, the header is the div that surrounds the h1 tag, and it changes that height to 100 pixels. So there's a lot of different styles we could use here. For example, we could use width, we could use color. So color will actually change the text color, but I think it might not actually work like this. Okay, so it does work, but usually we don't apply color to the div, we apply it directly to the text. But in this case, it looks like it works correctly. There's other properties such as background color. So we can set this to, for example, black. And now if I save this, the whole thing becomes black. There's also a border. So you could do a border of 2 pixels, solid, and then we give a color like, let's say red. And if we save this, now we have a border of 2 pixels. It's a solid border, meaning there's no gaps in it, and it's red. So there's a lot of different CSS elements that we could put here. I can't go over every single one of them, so if you do want to know all of them, make sure you like Google CSS elements. And if you click one of these links, they should give you like a list of all the different things you could do. But we're not going to go over every single one of them right now. For our website, what we want to do to the header is we want to make it a bit larger as we did. And then we want to use this thing called display flex. So what this will allow us to do is to center things inside of the div. So what we want to do is align items to center, and this will just allow us to center that title a bit. Sorry, I accidentally clicked something there, but it will just allow us to center this title a bit, and we could also center it horizontally on the page if we used using justify content center. Sorry, I meant to type center there. And if we save this, the title should now be centered both horizontally and vertically. So these two properties, align items and justify content, they only work because we have the display set to flex here. So if I were to remove this and save it, the two properties, align items and justify content, would not work. So that's why we have this display flex here. And I'll go over the flex display in a different video, but for right now you just need to know that that's what's keeping this centered. So now that we've styled the header, let's begin styling the articles. So you can see that we do have quite a bit to style here. We have one div that wraps around the entire article. And then if we want to add specific styling to just the heading or just the article content, we can do it using these classes. But for right now, let's just work with the article class. So I'm going to copy that. And in the CSS file, we want to do .article and then use our curly braces. And in here, the first thing we want to do is we want to give it a border. So let's do border 2 pixels, and we'll do solid, and let's do black. So if we save this, each article should now have a border around it. So now that we have a border, we need to add some spacing here because the articles are too close together. So there's two types of spacing, and this is a good way of demonstrating it. So here I want to add a padding, and I want to set this to 10 pixels. And if we save this, we should see that now it has some extra spacing inside of the border. So this is not actually what we want. What we want is called margin. So these are the two types of spacing around our elements that we can have. One is called padding, which pads inside of the border, so just around the element. and the other one is called margin, which pads outside of the border, and it's meant to separate elements from each other. So if we save this, we should now see that that's what we want. But we also do want a bit of padding as well, so let's add that in. So now we have 10 pixels of margin and 10 pixels of padding, and this looks a bit better. The elements are separated from each other and there's a bit of space between each element and its border. And there's one more thing we want to do here, which is one more thing we want to look at here, which is we applied a margin to all directions. So when we say margin 10 pixels, it's applying a margin on the left, the right, the top and the bottom. But if we wanted to only apply that to one side, we could say, for example, margin dash bottom. And this would only apply a margin to the bottom. And in this case, that's fine. But most of the time, just using a margin on its own will work well. Sometimes what you don't want to do is add a margin on the top if, for example, your title already had a margin on it. In that case, you do only a margin bottom and not a margin top, because what would happen is your title has a margin of 50 and then your article has a margin of 50, so the gap in between would end up being 100. If that was the case, it would be better to only apply a margin to the bottom of each element. But right now we don't really need to talk about that. I just wanted to bring it up in case someone was having that error. So after we do this, next what we want to do is round off the edges here, because I don't like how square this looks. So what we can do is we can do a border radius. So that's border dash radius, and we can set this to 16 pixels. So I like to set my border radius in increments of 4. So you can set it to 4, 8, 16 and so on. And that will just round off the corners here. 16 is usually what I go for, because I just think it looks the best. And yeah, I think that's the article's done. The only thing I want to change is maybe the text color for the heading. And then we want to add some color to the actual article itself and maybe to the button as well. So now that we have most of the CSS set up, the only thing we really have left to do is to change the colors of stuff. So let's begin by changing the color of this heading here. I'm just going to copy this class. You should know how to do this by now. We just use a dot and then the class name and then our curly braces. And I'm just going to change the color here. Let's try green first. Okay, so that's a bit too bright. Let's go for a different shade of green. And yeah, that looks about right. I didn't want to change the background color here just because we added padding here, but I'm just going to do it to show you why that's a bad idea right now. Let's just pick one of these colors at random, and you can see here that it's not properly filling this area. That's because we have this padding up here. If we get rid of that, it's still going to not be correct, and that's just because there's also some margin and padding on the H3 class here. So if we really wanted to do this, we'd have to strip out all of the margin and padding. So we'd have to do margin 0 here and then padding 0 as well. And now you can see it's almost right. There's still a bit more down here that's white, and that's coming from this HR down here. So this is not really the best way to do a background color on something like this. So I'm just going to get rid of all of this for now and put that padding back here. Okay, so now that we have the color for the heading set up, let's do the text here next. I'm not really sure what color we're going to use, and I'm just going to fast forward through most of this because we all should already know how to add colors and stuff by now. Okay, so I've done a bit of styling here. You probably think this yellow is not that good, it's too contrasting with the white. But I'm going to change the entire background of this card to black, so let's do that quickly. So now this looks a bit better with the black background. We have yellow text here. And also for the button, I had to remove the border. And then I just made it solid white with black text on it. And also let's make the button a bit bigger. We'll set it to 20 pixels by 20 pixels. And obviously for the width we'd have to go a bit wider here. Let's go with the 100 pixels. And yeah, that looks good. Maybe the font can just be a bit thicker. So what we can do here is font weight, and we can set this to bold. And yeah, that does look a bit better. Maybe we could have gone for a different color with the button here, but for now we'll just leave it like this. We can always just change the color at any time. But yeah, this is basically all that we want to do for styling for now. We've seen a lot of different elements and attributes that we can set in the CSS. Okay, so in this video we're just going to go over a few things, like the display flex we set up here but we never really spoke about. So also there's one more thing I want to do, which is the color is not really that good here. I want to change the background color of this to green, and let's change the text color to white, and that should look a bit better. Also let's do a box shadow on the article here, and we'll use 4 pixels, and then red. And I'll show you what this is in a second. So when we save, the 4 pixels and 4 pixels are for how wide it is on the left, the right and the bottom. And then the color is obviously what color the shadow shows as. And I think this design just looks a bit better. So now let's talk about flex, which we set earlier but we never really spoke about it. We did see what this align items and justify content does, but let's go over the actual flex display now. So in the HTML, let's create a div around the entire article section. So I'm just going to call this div with a class of articles. That's articles with an S here, not article like the article divs. And I'm going to move the closing of this div to the bottom after all of our articles. Okay, so now everything is basically wrapped within this articles div. And now we can start writing some CSS for that. So dot articles, and then our curly braces. And now let's apply this display flex and see what it does. So we can see here that now it's completely changed our layout. It's made everything go in a row. And this is similar to what we saw when we were working with tables in HTML. So right now this is a row. And if we wanted it to be a column just like we had before, we could do flex dash direction, and we can set that to either row or column. So row is what we have right now, and then column is what we originally had. So that's how you would use display flex. And then obviously you have the centering things here, which I can't really show you here because everything is centered by default. But yeah, another cool thing we could do is we could do gap, and we can set this to like 100 pixels, and if we save, it will put a gap of 100 pixels between each of these divs. Basically what it's doing is it's applying this 100 pixel gap between each item which is inside of this, and there's 3 items inside of this. It's not counting sub items, it's just the main items which are nested inside of this. So there's 3 items here, and it's adding a gap of 100 pixels between each of them. Yeah, that's basically how flex displays work. For centering, well, if I make this full screen, it's already basically centered. But if I were to change the width of this, so let's say I change the width and we set it to like, what can we set it to? Let's say 500 pixels. Okay, now it's set to 500 pixels. We can align this to the center using justify content center, or actually I think it's align item center. And now it's centered on our page. The way this works is align items centers horizontally, but only when you're using the column display. So if I were to change this to a row display, it would not center the items anymore. Now I'd have to use justify items here instead of align items. Actually, it's justify content and then align items. And they basically work opposite ways depending on whether you're using row or column here. But yeah, you guys can always just mess with that and figure out what's the correct way to do it on your design. But I'm not really going to center anything here, so I'm going to get rid of that and get rid of the width as well. And yeah, I think the gap needs to be a bit smaller as well, so I'll set that to like 20 pixels. And yeah, this looks good. Okay guys, so in this video we're going to go over JavaScript, but for this first video let's just go over all of the tools that we need for JavaScript. So to create a JavaScript file, we just want to head to the Explorer up here, and we want to click on New File, and I'm just going to name this app.js. So you can name it anything as long as it ends in .js. And again, just like when we created the CSS file, the first thing we want to do is we want to link it to the HTML file. So right at the bottom of your HTML, inside of the body tags, so just before your closing body tag, you want to use a script tag, and inside of the opening script tag you want to use src. So the property src is how we set a source, remember? And the source is the file of the script. So for this example we have the script called app.js, so I'm just going to type that in. And there's one more property we want to give it here, which is just defer, D-E-F-E-R. So the reason why we add this defer is so that the script runs last after the entire web page is loaded. The reason why we do this is because the script might interact with elements like buttons or stuff like that, and obviously we can't have the script running and interacting with the button before the button is created. So we need the page to load first and then the script should run. Now let's go over the tools that we use for JavaScript. So firstly we want to click on this extensions button here, and you want to search for ESLint. And you want to click on this first one with an orange icon here. So you can click the install button on this, and this will basically help you when writing your JavaScript inside of your JavaScript files. So yeah, install this. There's not really any other extensions that you need to install here, but there's a few like Prettier that you could install. I'm not going to do that because we don't really need any of that. Just make sure you have the ESLint extension installed. Next, let's look at in the browser. If we right click we can select inspect element here, and this will give us a sort of pop out here where we can click on the console button up here. So I'm not going to click on anything right now. Let me just explain what we're looking at right now. So I'm going to full screen this, and this element section here is basically showing us everything that's on our website. This is the HTML, and if we hover over a specific thing here like our article, it will show us on the left hand side what each part of that HTML is doing. And down here at the bottom we have the CSS. So in the CSS section we can see what styles are applied to each thing. I wouldn't really recommend using this thing down here to work with CSS, but one thing that I do want to show you is this little diagram here. So what it's showing you is that this is an element, this is the padding around it, and then comes the border and then the margin, which we went over in a previous video already, but I just wanted to show you a visual demonstration of that. So now let's switch over to the console tab here, and this is where we'll see output as we develop with JavaScript. So usually with JavaScript we use it to make stuff interactive, but when we're just practicing or we want to debug something, debug means to make sure code is working, then we output stuff to this console here. And if we just click on there, we can actually type JavaScript into here. So I'm just going to type something here to show you. You don't need to follow along with this. I'm going to type console.log, and I'm going to use brackets here. And inside of those brackets, I'm just going to type hello world. And if I press enter here, I'll actually see that it prints out hello world here. So this is how we interact with the console. Now right now we aren't going to type anything into this console here. We're going to be writing all of our JavaScript inside of the JS file that we created, but I just wanted to show you where those outputs will be. Hey guys, so I've increased my font size since the last video, and I've changed the theme color to white to make it a bit easier to see. So now we can begin working with our JavaScript file. So in the last video I showed you how to right click here and inspect, but on some browsers you can also do this by hitting F12 on the keyboard. And now we're in the console here. You might be in the elements page when you start, so just click on console here. And this is where our output will show for now. So for right now we're not going to output anything into the actual page. We're just going to be using the console to view outputs. So in this video I'm just going to show you two things. One is how to print something out, and the other is how do we store information. So to print something out we want to use the word console, and console is referring to this console here, so the place where we view the code. And we want to do console dot. So before I continue, how this is actually working is, in programming languages there's something called a class, and a class is a model of something. So in this case the word console here is a class that is a model of this console here, and now we want to access a function within this console. So we want to access the log function, which is how we log something out to this console. And to call a function we need to use brackets like this, so open and close brackets. And inside of this we want to just put whatever we want it to print out. But unlike in HTML, here when we're just working with text we need it to be within quotes. So we can't just have raw text around, we need the text to be surrounded by quotes. And I'm just going to type Theo here just to see what it does. And as you can see here, it just prints out Theo. But let's get back to this and talk about how this works. So in programming languages, we have something called classes, which is basically a model that's trying to show something in code. It's trying to model something in code. So for example, imagine if a human was modeled in code. Then you would have a class for hand, a class for leg, a class for head, and so on. And each of those classes would have functions. So for example, in the hand, you could have a function called close. So that's where you'd close your hand, or open, where you'd open your hand. Or for the head, you could have a function like blink. And that's basically how this works. So usually the first word you type here is a class. In this case, it's console. That's what we're going to be accessing. And then the name of a function. And we use a dot here because the function belongs to this class. Now, not all functions belong to classes. You can just have a function on its own. We'll get to that later. But for right now, that's how classes and functions work. So now that we know how to print something out, we can change the text here to anything, by the way, and if we save it, we'll print that out. Let's look at how we can save information. So to do this, we're going to use something called a variable. So to create a variable, we use the keyword let. And you can see here that some suggestions pop up. It's just this first let. You don't have to click on anything here. You can just type the word let and put a space here. And then we give our variable a name. So I'm just going to call this container, and there's a reason why I'm calling it that, but you can name this anything you want. And then we use the equals to sign, and we can put any value here. So I'm just going to put my name again. And remember, since we're working with text here, it has to be surrounded by quotes. And at the end of this line, it's good practice to use this semicolon thing here. You don't need to use it. It's a bit outdated now. JavaScript no longer requires you to put this at the end of each line, but it's good practice to put it there. And if I save this now, so what this container is it's a variable, and a variable is something that you can store code inside of. Not code, you can store values inside of it, sorry. So when we store values inside of this, we're either doing it so that we can access that value later, or we're doing it so we can track changes to that value throughout the page. Now, obviously, this is a bit complicated right now. I just want you to understand what a variable is. It's just a container that a value can be stored inside of. And you can also replace what's inside of it later on. So for example, I can say container is now equal to something else. So now we've replaced what's inside of container. And the reason why I use the name container is so that it makes more sense. You can understand that whatever we put on this side is just going inside of it. But yeah, to use the value inside of container, we can just simply console.log, and then we want to print out container here. We don't need to include the quotes or anything. We just type the name of the variable, and if we save this, it will print out what's inside of our variable here. By the way, there's many different types of values. So when we're working with text, we need to surround it in these quotes. But if you were to work with the number, for example, it's fine if we just type the number on its own, no quotes. And this is how we would work with numbers. You can also work with true and false here. So if I type the word true, it will print out true. This is not actually text though. True is a value. So if you type something else, like something random, that wouldn't work. That will give you an error. So true and false are actual values. And yeah, there's a few other values that we could look at, but I think you get the idea now. It's just a container that we store something inside of. As for the let keyword here, that's just a keyword we put in front when we're creating a variable. There's other versions of this as well. For example, var. This is kind of the same thing. And then we also have const. So const is a bit different. If we use the keyword const, we can't change what's inside of container later. So here, if I try and set container equal to something else, we're going to get an error here. assignment to constant variable, so we aren't allowed to reassign the data inside a constant variable. So constant variables are used for holding information that will never change. Hey guys, so in the last video we went over variables and the console.log statement, and in this video let's just go over the different types of variables. So let's just spin up the website quickly, and I'm just going to add some space here where we can type in the different variables that we have. And I'm going to change the name here to var_string. So if you couldn't guess by that, the first variable we're going to be looking at is string. So a string is basically anything between double quotes or single quotes. So it can be words, it can be numbers, anything. And in programming, any programming language, a string is treated as just text. So even if we had a number in here like 12, this is just a number, but because it's surrounded by quotes, it will be taken as a string. So this will be like a sentence or text. If we wanted to store actual numbers, we need to do a integer. So I'm going to name this variable var_int, and I'm going to set it equal to 12 as well. So these two 12s are not the same. This counts as words, and this is an actual number that we can do maths and stuff on. So now that we know how words and numbers work, there are a few different things we can also do with numbers. Like there's something called float and double, which is basically just numbers with the decimal point. But I don't think you really need to get into that right now. The next thing we want to look at is booleans. So I'm going to name this var_bool. And this can be either true or false. And the reason why we would use this is if we were checking if something is true. So for example, if this age was entered in by a user and we needed to make sure that it's like over 18, for example, then we don't know what the value of this will be while we're coding it. The user could type anything in here. So we need to check if the thing that they typed in is greater than 18. And that's the reason why we'd use these bools. It would be the return value of that. So if we check if this number is less than 18, it will say true. If we check if it's greater than 18, obviously 12 is not greater than 18, so it would say false. But we'll look more at that when we get into if statements. So the next variable type that we want to look at is called arrays. So we can call it arrays or lists. And I'm just going to call this var_array. And to create one of these, we want to use the square brackets. And a list or array is just a list of items. So for example, we can put a string in here of the name Theo, and then next to it we need to put a comma. So now we're putting a second item in here. I'm going to put another string. I'm going to say apple, and I can even put another string here like 25. This 25 is not a string, it's an integer. But yeah, that's basically how arrays work. You just store multiple values in the same array. And you can access these different values by, for example, printing out var_array, and then we add in our square brackets here, and we put the position of the value that we want. Now in JavaScript, we start with 0. So this string Theo is at position 0 in the array. The string apple is at position 1 in the array, and the number 25 is at position 2 in the array. So let's print out the first position, and we should be expecting to get the word apple back here. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to open up the console here. Remember, you can either press F12 or you can right click and select inspect and then head to the console here. And we can see the word apple printed back here. So if I were to type 0 here, we'd expect it to say Theo here, which it does. And yeah, that's basically how arrays work. So next, let's look at objects. So this isn't really a variable type, but in JavaScript it's kind of used like a variable. In other programming languages we don't use it this way. So I'm just going to call this var underscore object, and to create one we just use our curly braces here, and inside of here we just want to type key and value pairs. So for example, I can type the key name, and notice that I didn't put this in quotes. That's because I'm not storing a variable here. I'm creating a brand new variable called name, and you use this I think it's called a colon here. It's just the 2 dots, and next to that you put an actual value, like for example Theo. So here I'm going to use a quotes and type Theo, and then next to this we can put a comma and even give it a second value like fruit, and then let me capitalize that and our colon thing, and then we put a second value here, so I'll just put apple again. And now to use this object, all we need to do is we need to say the name of the object here, var underscore object, and then we put a dot, and you can see in this list here the 2 values that we created pop up. So if I wanted to access the name property, I could click that. If I save, it would print out the name. If we wanted to access the fruit property, we can just click on that here, and if I save, it would print out the fruit. So that's how objects work in JavaScript. Okay guys, so in the last video we looked at the different types of variables, and in this video I think let's look at the different operators or the maths functions that we have here. So basically how to do addition, subtraction, division, and all of that stuff. So let me just get rid of all of this. And to do this in JavaScript, let's do a console.log here. You should know how to do this by now. And let's try and print out 2 plus 3 here. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to start up the live server because I have it closed right now. And once that opens, I'm going to press F12 to open up the console here, and you can see it says 5 here. So to do sums in JavaScript, you can basically just type them out like this. For division, for example, if I wanted to do 6 divided by 2, you have to use the slash. It's the same slash that you use in closing tags on HTML. I think it's the /. So that's how you would do division in JavaScript. For multiplication, it's just the star symbol. So we'll save that, and it says 12 here. What else? For addition and subtraction is basically just their normal symbols. And there's also, for example, some math functions, like we can do let's try 11. We'll use this percentage sign, and then we'll do 2. So if I save this, it will say 1 here. And what this is actually doing is it's doing a division and only giving back the remainder, which is 1. So 2 goes into 11 5 times with the remainder of 1, and that's what it's showing here, the remainder. So now if we change this to 3, you can see the remainder is 2 here. So 3, 6, 9, and then there'll be 2 left as a remainder. Yeah, so that's basically how operators work. But there are other operators which are really important in JavaScript and all programming languages actually, which is, if for example here I type 2, I can use a double equals to sign and then put another 2 on this side. And if I save this, notice it says true here. So this is a comparison operator. It checks if the thing on the left is the same as the thing on the right. Now one thing I want you to notice is if I put 1, 2 as a number and 1 as a string here, it will still say true here. but actually they're not the same thing, even though they're both holding the value 2. One is a number and one is a string. So how you do this is you need to have 3 equals to sign, and this checks if they're both exactly the same. That includes the data type and stuff, and here it will say false. So this can become useful if, for example, we took a variable up here, like let's say we'll create a variable called password here, and we'll set it equal to some text here. So we'll pretend like this is what the user typed in, and down here I want to check if the password the user typed in is equal to the password we have down here. So you can see that now it becomes useful for checking if the two values are the same. This is not actually how we would handle passwords. JavaScript is viewable in the browser, so you wouldn't want passwords to be stored in the JavaScript. But yeah, you basically, this is how you compare two things. We can also change that here, so let's type something else. Now we're pretending that the user typed this in and is checking this against the password Theo, and you can see that it's false here. Okay, so in this video we're going to go over if statements, which is how you run code based on whether a statement like this is true or false. So I'm firstly just going to get rid of everything here, and to create an if statement you just type the word if, and then you want to use your normal brackets. Now I haven't spoken about this before, but whenever we're using a function like if or console.log, we have to use these brackets here to say that we want to run that function. And we'll speak about this more when we learn to create our own functions. But for now, inside of these brackets is where the parameters for this function goes. And this function takes the parameters of what do you want to check. So for example, I want to check if 1 is equal to 2. And after this, we need to put in our curly braces here. So the curly braces are the same thing you use in CSS here. And between this, we want to put the JavaScript code that we want to run. So I'm just going to console.log here, and it doesn't really matter what I print out here. So I'll just save this, and we can see here that nothing prints out. So it didn't print out because 1 is not equal to 2. And remember, you need to use 2 equals to signs here. Don't accidentally put 1. If you use 1, it means you're assigning something. So for example, if we had a variable down here, like let's create a variable called myvar, and we set it equal to 2. This equals to is how we set something equal to something else. So this single equals to is not for checking, it's for setting. And then we have the double equals to up here, which is for checking if two things are equal. And then obviously the triple equals to, which I showed you in the previous video. So now let's try and make these two statements the same. So I'll set this to 1 as well. And if we save that, now it prints out the console.log here. So let me again change it back to something different. And now I'm going to show you how to run code only if this is not true. So let's say we didn't want this to do anything if it was true. We only want it to do something when it's not true. Then we can simply put a exclamation mark here, and we need to basically surround the entire condition here in brackets. So what this does is it's saying not, and then this entire bracket thing here. So basically this bracket here will run, and it will say, for example, either true or false. Here it will say false because 1 is not equal to 2. So let me just write that down here. So the outcome of this bracket here will be the word false. And then we have a not sign next to it, which is just an exclamation mark. So basically this is saying if not false, so in other words true, and then it's running the statement. So this not sign here flips whatever the outcome of this is. Now, for now, we don't really need to know about that. I'm just showing you how you would do this if you only needed to run code if this was not true. But if you need to run code if this is true and also something else when it's not true, then after the curly braces here, we can use the word else. And then we put another set of curly braces here. So what this will do is it will run the code here if the condition is true, and it will run the code inside of else only if the condition is false. So let me just make a comment here so that we know what's happening. Will run if condition is true. And then down here I'm going to say will run only if all above conditions are false. So what do I mean by all above conditions? We'll see that soon. So let's console.log, and I'll just log out the word reach the end here. So you can see that now that prints out here in the console. But this print statement obviously didn't print out because this is not equal to each other. Now if we do set it equal to each other, we get the first print statement here and we don't get this one. But what if we wanted to check two things? So here I want to check if 1 is equal to 2, and that's obviously not true here, so we're reaching the end. But I also want to check if maybe 2 is greater than 1. So to do this, let's move this else statement down a bit. And after the if statement here, I want to use an else if. So it's the word else and then the word if. They're not one command, it's two separate commands here. And inside of this if statement here, I want to put in the second thing that we're checking, which is if 2 is greater than 1. And I'm going to put the curly braces here again. And now let me just move this else statement up a bit. I know this tutorial is a bit confusing, but if statements can be a bit tricky for people who are using it for the first time, but I'm sure you guys will get it soon. So here I want to, this will run only if the above statements are false and this statement is true. So what this means is, if this first if statement runs, everything below this won't run, doesn't matter what's written in here. But if this statement doesn't run, it fails, then it will first check if this is true. So it's first going to check if 2 is greater than 1. And if it is, then it will run the code in here. If this is not true and this is not true, then only will it do what's in the else. And the else basically covers all scenarios, so no matter what, if these two don't run, then the third one will run. So I'm going to console.log here. And I'm just going to print out else if ran. And if we save this, we can see that it console.logs that out here. So it did that because 1 is not equal to 2, but 2 is greater than 1. So now let's change this back to 1 here to make them both equal. Now it prints out the first console.log statement because 1 is equal to 1. And let's make them not equal to anymore. And let's also make this not true. So now it says reach the end here. That's because 1 is not equal to 2 and 2 is not greater than 3. So we run the default else statement. So this is basically where the default code that you want to run in case everything fails should go. And I know that you guys may not get all of this right now. I know it's a big topic to cover, but I do need to go over this early in the JavaScript tutorial because we use it for a lot of stuff here. Hey guys, so in this video we're going to begin wrapping up the series. There's only 2 more videos left. In this video I'm going to go over functions, and in the next video we're going to go over loops. So let me get rid of all of this and let's begin working on functions. So what are functions? Functions are collections of code that we can run at a later stage. Now, I know this is not really that good of an explanation, so I'm just going to show it to you first and then we can go over it. So to create a function, I'm going to type the keyword function here. And then we need to give our function a name. So I'm just going to call this my_func. And let's give this brackets here. So these are your normal brackets. And right now we don't need to put anything inside of these brackets. I'll show you how they work soon. And next to that we need to use these curly braces. So the same way we did in CSS, we use these curly braces here. And inside of our function we can write some code. So for example here I'm going to do console.log, and in here I'm going to just print out a random thing here. So with this, we're going to log out something random to the console here. If I inspect and go to the console, we're not going to see anything. And what this is actually doing is it's not running this code in here. So when we have a function, we're creating a function with code inside of it that can be called later on in our code. So basically we're storing a set of instructions, and then somewhere later down in our code we can call it, for example, myfunc, and we need to use the brackets again here. We can't, if we want to run a function, we can't just have the name here. We need to include those brackets, which means we're running it. And now we can see that it does print out the string we have here. Okay, so now let's go through this and see what it actually does. So this keyword function here creates a function. And the next option here we're passing in is the name of our function. So we're just calling it myfunc. You can think of the name of a function the same way you think of a variable name. It's just a name so that we can reference it later on. And yeah, these brackets here, they are where we accept parameters. So I'm going to show you what a parameter looks like now. I'm going to say name here. And instead of printing out this thing here, we're going to print out the name. And what this is actually doing is it's taking a variable as a parameter, and then this console.log is going to log out the same parameter we take in. So now when we call this function, we actually need to pass something in. So I'm going to pass in my name here. And when I save, it actually prints out my name here. So it's taking it as an input here, and that's what we defined up here. And then inside of the function it's doing our console.log, and it's logging out the name variable that we took as a parameter here. And if you need more parameters or something, you can just add in a comma here and then take in as many as you want. And that's basically how we would do functions. Now before I end the video, there's one more thing I want to show you which I forgot to show you in previous lessons, which is how we interact with the HTML document that we link the script to. So to interact with, for example, the divs here or the buttons or whatever, in our app.js file or whatever you named your JavaScript file, we need to type the word document. And you can see here that there's 2 versions. One is with the capital D and one is with the lowercase d. So we want the one with the lowercase d. And this document, actually, it's like a reference to the HTML document. So to get an item from the HTML document, like let's say we wanted, let's take this article heading here. So I'm going to grab this thing with the class of article heading. So I'm going to say document.get. And here when I type the word get, you can see a few things popped up. One is get element by ID, which is the most common use of this. and then is get element by class name, and that's what we want right now. We're going to select an element based on its class name, and we're going to store this in something. So I'm going to shift this code over a bit, and here at the beginning I'm going to create a variable. So I'm just going to say let going to call this, what can we call it, titles equal to, and then I'm just going to neaten this up a bit. Okay, so we have a variable called titles here, and we set it equal to document.getElements by class name, and this is a function. So remember, we need to use the brackets here when we're calling a function, and now it wants us to actually give it the string of the class name that we're looking for. So our class name here is going to be article heading. I'm just going to copy that and paste it in here, and now when I save this, it's going to give an error here because I forgot to put the quotes here. It happens sometimes. Make sure you always include your quotes when you're working with strings. And on the next line here, I'm just going to console.log the titles just to see what it looks like. And you can see here that we've got an object or a collection with 3 things inside of it. And if we expand that out further, we can see the properties of these 3 things. And here in the inner text, we can see article heading here, which is the actual, like, the text we put inside of this tag. So let me get out of this here quickly, and I'm going to try and log out those article headings. So to do this, I'm going to use our square brackets just like we did when we worked with lists, and I'm going to say 0 here. So this should be the first element in our list or collection, and I'm going to say dot, and then let's go with inner HTML, and I'm going to save this, and we can see here that it says article heading here. So let's actually change this HTML here. So remember, because we're getting all of the elements that say article heading here, this is going to be the first one, so this is index 0, and then this one is going to be index 1, and this one is going to be index 2. So on the first one, which is what we're grabbing by getting element 0 here, I'm going to change what it says in here so that we can test whether it's grabbing the correct element or not. So I'm just going to write Theo here, and if I hit save, you can see that now it's grabbing the word Theo. So this is how we would interact with elements in our HTML from the JavaScript. And I know this lesson was supposed to just be about functions, but hey, get element by class name is a function, so technically, you know, we did cover functions here. Hey guys, so you've made it to the last video in the Web Basics playlist, and in this video we're just going to go over loops. Now this could be a bit confusing, but hey, it's your last video, so we should make it a bit more confusing than the other videos in this playlist. And in this video, the first type of loop we're going to look at is the while loop, and then I'm going to show you a for loop. But yeah, let's start off with the while loop because it's a bit easier. So up here I'm just going to create a variable, and I'm going to say let, and I'll just call it x, and I'm going to set it equal to the number 1 here. And I'm just going to go down a bit here, and I'm going to say while, and then I'm going to use my brackets here. And inside of these brackets, I'm going to put an expression. So an expression is what we use in if statements. So if you remember from the if statements video, we can do something like if x is greater than 3. So right now this is false already. We needed to have a less than sign here. And now instead of saying if x is less than 3, we're actually saying while x is less than 3. So what this will do is we add in our curly braces here, and any code that we put inside of this curly braces will run over and over again on repeat as long as the statement is true. And usually, to prevent this from just running infinitely, we want to actually make sure there's some way for this statement to become true through the code that's inside of here. So I know that's a bit confusing. I'm going to just show you an example now. We want to console.log, and let's log out the variable x here. And I'm not going to hit save now because this will just run like in an infinite loop forever. Below this, I'm going to say x is equal to x plus 1. So before I hit save here, let me go through what this will do. So we're creating a variable called x and we're giving it the value of 1. And here we're saying while x is less than 3, so as long as x is not equal to or greater than 3, we want to run the code inside of here over and over again. And this code is going to console.log whatever value is inside of x. So right now it will be 1. And then it's going to set x equal to x plus 1. So x plus 1, it means it's going to add 1 to x. So whatever number x is right now, it's going to become 1 more than that. So it's incrementing. And then it's going to check again whether x is now less than 3 or not. And it still is going to be less than 3. So it's going to go through the code again and check again and go through until the statement at the top here becomes false. So now let me save this and we can see what output we get in the console. So I saved it and it looks like we're loading here. Okay, so it looks like we have some type of error here. I'm just going to kill the live server. And let's close this page and reopen it. Okay, let me head to the console here. And now you can see that we have 1 and 2 printed out here. So I'm just going to change the value here to like 5 and save again and see what happens. And yeah, now you can see that it's printing all the numbers up to 5 here. I'm not sure why the live server stopped working, but yeah, that stuff happens sometimes. And yeah, I'm just going to go over this one more time just in case some of you didn't get what a while loop is. So we have a variable up here. We have a statement here that's checking if something is true or not. And as long as the statement in here is not true, is true, we're going to run the code here over and over again. As soon as this statement becomes false, it's no longer true. We're going to stop running the code in here and then move to whatever we have down here. So I'm going to console.log here and I'll just say the word done. And if I save this, you see that now it printed out all the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then it printed out done here. If you're wondering why it stopped at 4 even though we're saying less than 5 here, it's because as soon as this becomes 5, the statement is no longer true. 5 is not less than 5, they are equal. So that's why it stops at 4 here. And once the statement becomes false, it just skips over all the code and then it runs this code down here. So it says done at the end here. Now that we know how while loops work, hopefully, let's go through for loops and you should get a better understanding of loops through using the for loops. So in a for loop, we want to do for, and we actually want to create the variable inside of here. So unlike while loops where you need to already have something that you're checking, in a for loop, we can create the variable in here. So I'm going to say let I equal 1. So we're creating a variable called I and we're setting it equal to 1. If you see me using the letter I here, we can use any variable name, but it's very common to use the letter I when we're working with for loops. So once we write the variable here, we want to add a semicolon. And next to it, we want to add in our second statement. So the first statement is to create our variable. The second statement is to check our variable against something. So we're going to say I is less than 10. And we've seen this already. This is our expression. It's the same as we use in if statements and while loops. So basically we're going to run some code as long as I is less than 10. And this actually takes a third parameter here as well. So we add our semicolon again. And now we want to say what we want to increment I by each time. So I'm going to do I plus plus. Sorry, hit the wrong key there. But yeah, these two plus signs means the same as saying I is equal to I plus 1. So instead of saying, let me write it down here. Instead of saying I is equal to I plus 1, we can just say I plus plus. And both of these do the same thing. So I'm just going to get rid of this here. And let's do our curly braces again. Remember, anything that's running blocks of code needs to have these curly braces. By block of code, I mean inside of here we can put as many statements as we want, and those statements will only run when the for loop is running. So let's do console.log and we'll log out I here. We should know what I is going to print out here. Let's save this, and it's all the numbers from 1 to 9. And why does it stop at 9? Because once this hits 10 here, 10 is going to be equal to 10, so the statement less than is no longer true. And yeah, if we wanted this to start from 0, we could just change this to 0 here, and now we'd have all the numbers from 0 to 9. Yeah, that's basically how for loops work. The reason why we'd start from 0 is so that we can do I plus 1 here. And now we have all the numbers from 1 to 10. But this is just a trick we use sometimes if we need the numbers from 1 up to the end result here. Anyways, I'm just rambling now. There's no reason to speak about this anymore. We've gone over while loops, we've gone over for loops, and we've gone over a lot of things in this course. And yeah guys, this is the end of the Web Basics playlist, and I'll see you guys in the next playlist.